Nick, let's throw it to the in-depth review of 22 Jump Street. How about you just take it off for us,
let's
bro?
jump right into it. So, we saw it this week, and let me pull up a synopsis, and we'll kind of talk about what the movie's basically about. From the IMDb page, after making their way through high school twice, big changes are in store for officers Schmidt and Jinko when they go deep undercover at a local college. So this is a sequel to 21 Jump Street that came out 2 years ago, starring Chanum Tatum and Jonah Hill.
Yes.
So let's jump right into kind of what we thought.
Okay, well, I really enjoyed myself. I had very few problems with the movie, and I would say I'd give it an 80%.
Ooh. An 8 out of 10. All right.
8 out of 10.
John, what do you think?
You know, I'm with Jacob here. I'd give it probably a B. I was quite impressed.
All right. Jordan.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty funny. I liked the first one, and I thought the second one did a pretty good job as far as, because comedy sequels are always hard.
Right.
Or sequels are hard.
True.
But comedy sequels are hard. I enjoyed what I saw of it. Kind of a funny story. I was in the theater, and the projector they had kept overheating several times. So I saw several sequences over and over again, and but from what I got to see, I kind of missed the climax. But from what I saw, film was funny. So
okay. Yeah, I'm kind of thought the film had plenty of problems. There was a lot of structural and script problems with this film, story-wise even, and everything. But who cares? Because I thought, I laughed the entire time. And this movie, I think, for me, had a couple of, at least 3 that I'll talk about later, probably in spoilers, 3 sequences or gags that are probably about the funniest thing I've seen in some time, as long as I can remember. So we'll get into those in a bit, but I'll give it probably a 7 out of 10, maybe a 6, which sounds bad, but I don't think it's...
For your radar, it's pretty
I think
good.
it could have easily been a 9 out of 10, but I think they dropped the script a little bit.
Yeah.
Dropped the ball on the scripting side of it a little bit. But let's jump right into in-depth kind of review here. Anybody want to start us off? Or
Yeah, I'll go first.
Go ahead.
I'll talk about the beginning. I thought it was a little slow at the beginning, and it was kind of hard to pick up. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just because the type of jokes that were at the beginning were a bit on the nose, Like they're walking into the 22 Jump Street for the first time, and they mentioned the Korean Jump Street from 21 Jump Street, and they're like, oh, how convenient that there's a
Vietnamese
church right across the street.
Right across the street.
What part of the beginning are we talking about? I had a problem with the opening sequence.
Oh no, I love that. I thought that was funny, and
I didn't think it was funny at all. When that happened, I was like, oh man.
When they did the whole gun
there
show,
were some funny little jokes
dumb.
in it, but I thought the whole squid on his face thing was a little over the top, and the action in this movie is one of the biggest problems I have because it's an action comedy.
Yeah,
and I don't think the action's very good at all in this movie, that whole sequence kind of relied more on
scenes
action.
of running and climbing. That's all. All the action was.
Yeah. Well, the opening sequence was. Are you talking about the sequence after where they go into talking about?
I'm talking about more of the beginning third of the.
Oh, okay.
The movie.
So the first act, basically.
Yeah. I'm not. I enjoyed Jonah Hill's Mexican impression. I thought that was just hilarious.
Really?
No, come on, that was funny.
Really?
Yeah, I thought it was
so
funny
dumb.
too, but then I just didn't think they went anywhere with it.
I rolled my eyes the entire time. Like, this is just go. Come on.
To me, the punchline was when Chanum Tatum came in with his terrible accent,
right.
But then that bit went on for another minute and a half,
and I was done.
I was like, okay,
I was done with
it's not going anywhere funny anymore.
Let's go.
Kind of something I don't know if I coined it or not, but I call it kitchen sink comedy because they throw out everything, including the kitchen sink, at this movie. It to me, it deals with every genre of comedy you can possibly squeeze in. This feels like these two directors, which I forgot to write their names down. I think it's
Christopher Miller and Phil Lord.
Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. And this goes for all their movies. They also did 21 Jump Street, and they've directed
Lego Movie.
The Lego movie I thought felt a lot like this movie, where they're throwing so many jokes at the screen constantly that and every different genre. Did anybody else get that feeling?
Yeah.
I'll go a little more in depth into this, but I feel like they don't care what the joke is, what the genre is, whether it fits in this movie or not. If they think they can make you laugh, they're gonna throw it at the screen.
Yeah.
And I think this is a strength of the movie because I think most of their comedy sticks. Like Jake said after the first act, I think the movie gets onto a roll and it doesn't stop, the jokes anyway. the story we can talk about in a bit, but I kind of wanted to talk about just this kitchen sink comedy kind of philosophy that I'm trying to lay down here. Was just that I thought there was, for one, let's talk about like genre expectation comedy. They take the buddy comedy genre and kind of turn it in its head by playing the bromance between Tatum and Jonah Hill straight. They play this like straight, and that's the comedy within it. So to me, that's kind of a clever layered comedy effect where it takes place on different.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed that. That was something where I thought like, I don't know if this will be that funny, and like watching it, I was laughing out loud in the theater.
Yeah, it becomes very funny.
Every scene, because I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is fantastic.
Yeah, like specifically the scene with the shrink, where they go see a shrink together. I don't think this will spoil too much because I'm not going to tell you what the punchlines are, but it turns out really funny.
We can reenact the whole movie.
Seeing them play out their relationship together on the couch. But that's one style of humor. There was smart humor. Like there's a lot of metaphors and analogies in the film between the dialogue. Like you were just saying, where they walk in. Like I really thought it was clever writing, where they go in and they see their captain for the first time.
Oh my gosh, that was. I was gonna say something about that, Nick Offerman. Yeah.
Yeah, and the captain's talking about, you got away with it the first time. Nobody cared about 21 Jump Street, but you got lucky, and now you get 22 Jump Street. And this is the guy. It works for the story, but this is just these are the characters just talking out like, hey, we're in a movie. The first one worked. Now the studio's giving us a sequel, and they're throwing money at us, and it does that a lot.
Well, I didn't actually. That was something I didn't think was that funny, because after watching the first one, especially some of the things they said, is like it got old for me after a while. Like it was like, okay, I get the joke, and then it just kept going and going. I'm like, I don't care anymore. Maybe that's just my kind of humor. I'm more of like a slapstick. Like this is why I liked it, because they had a lot of slapstick, and then also like the sink humor, whatever.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is like the kitchen sink comedy style. It means they used every style, and I'll get to that too. I've got a list of just like examples of every style of humor they've used in this movie. Mm-hmm. But I think that's hitting on the same thing. So then, because my next one was slapstick humor, like the car chase scene where the bad guys are causing maximum damage on campus,
and no one's noticing this whatsoever.
Right, and it's also at the same time it plays off the smart humor because it plays as a metaphor for the budget of the film, getting higher and higher and being higher than the first, but it also plays out very visual. There's a scene where we look down from the top as the cars go into a building, and you hear a bunch of crashing and hitting, and then they come flying out the other side of the building, which I thought was a really weird, clever shot to include in the movie, and just an example of kind of this slapstick humor. I mean, there's plenty of people getting hit in the head and falling down and slapping each other and hitting each other
or shooting each other,
for comedy. But that's just kind of an example.
Can I bring up did anyone notice the name of the football team and why I think that was even funnier for me? Just because
no, I didn't even.
They're the Statesmen, and their mascot is a like the Quaker Oats guy.
So pretty much just like a similar college.
Yeah, exactly. And I just started laughing. I'm like, wow,
that's pretty funny.
Like this college is nothing like the one on the movie.
No, I didn't pay attention to that at all. That's hilarious.
I think for me that made it even more funny, just because I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is so not. I wish this was what this college was like, but it's not.
But to wrap up the whole kitchen sink humor thing, one more that I found was gross out humor was in here too. The scene with when Chanum Tatum first joins the football team and he meets another kindred spirit, and he is cleaning his ear with a Q-tip and drops into a sandwich, and then the sandwich falls on the ground, and there's a whole scene around it just involving gross out humor. So I just wanted to highlight 5 examples of how this movie uses every style of comedy constantly, and they're just constantly throwing jokes up at the screen. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. There was a lot of different types of comedy.
There were, and it did pay off, and I would say I think that's what made this movie more funny to me, because they use not just the buddy cop, because that gets pretty old, because okay, we get it, like the other guys, I thought that it was funny for a while, then after a while I'm like, I'm done with this movie. But this one, they kept throwing different types of comedy at me, and I'm like, oh, I'm still laughing. I think that's why it kept. And I did.
It keeps it fresh.
Yeah, it keeps it fresh. And I did feel like, I guess somewhere towards the middle, there was a bit of a lull. I don't know if any of you guys thought that. I can't remember what scenes, but it was a lot of after the fiasco with the daughter.
Kind of in the story arc point where both of them kind of hit a low, and then try to
and for a while
put some time into character arc.
Yeah, and for a while there, I was just kind of like, okay, well, when's this movie going to start back up again?
I didn't feel that at all. But Jordan, what do you think?
Yeah,
do you feel any lulls in it or?
Not really. I mean, I enjoyed, like you were kind of talking about, Nick. I thought the self-aware humor was hilarious, and that's kind of what I loved about it, was that, and I thought that was a really smart way to do it. You know, where they, like, because as a comic fan, I'm a big fan of Deadpool, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with Deadpool, but
if it was Deadpool, it'd sell a lot better, I think.
He's very self-referential.
Yeah, like he's aware that he's in a comic book, which makes it so much funnier, because then he can make all kinds of jokes, which is what I loved about the beginning when they're with Mustache Commissioner. Yes, Parks and Rec man. Mustachio. Mustache man.
Mustachio.
Oh, and, you know, like you said, he's going on and on about, you know, now we have all this money and we're going to throw it at you. Or, you know, like how...
Yeah, I thought that scene. I really enjoyed that scene.
Because then they go to their HQ headquarters and it's just really, really, like... nice for no reason. And
doesn't Jonah Hill walk in and say, "This looks like one huge ice cube or cube of ice"?
Yeah, they see ice cube, and he's
looks like Iron Man's office or whatever.
His office looks like an ice cube. And
actually, my favorite joke was when when they were still with the captain, and he's explaining like what they're going to college or something, and Chanum Tatum says, "Don't you think couldn't we do something different, like protect the president or something in the White House?" Which is kind of like and Jonah Hill says, "Now that wouldn't work at all," which is kind of a comment towards Chanum Tatum's kind of financially failed action movie from last year, which was White House Down.
Yeah,
I guess I never caught that part.
Which was actually a really good movie, but
yeah,
I just thought it was a funny comment where I'm like,
that whole sequence, I was losing it during that scene.
Yeah, I was a little embarrassed sitting next to Jordan because he was just obnoxiously laughing.
Well, you're lucky you didn't take me, because I was like, there are 3 sequences, to name a few. I think there's more like 5 in this movie that I think are so insanely funny that I was just squealing in the theater watching it. And so we were talking earlier, I was saying that's why I like to watch comedies at home, because I mean, I'll just laugh out loud at anything.
Because then Nick doesn't get thrown out of the theater.
Yeah, I can laugh uninhibited.
Can't throw Nick out of his house.
I'd like to comment on the cameos, the comedian cameos that they kind of had in this with Patton Oswalt and I can't remember his name, but the guy from Archer.
Yes, that's what I was very. Yeah, I want to say that.
It starts with a C. I don't remember.
Was he
he's the coach.
Yeah, he was the coach. Yeah. He only has like 2 lines, but you listen and you're like,
"There's Archer."
Is Archer right there?
I didn't catch that, but I remember he had a really funny line.
Yeah, especially when they're taking down the goalpost. And he's like, "Oh, come on, guys!" You know,
it's not coming down.
It's like, it's not coming down. Like he sounds just like
Archer.
Archer
voice, yeah. But I thought that was funny because they not really so much on Archer guy's standpoint of view, but Patton Oswalt actually kind of played a bigger part in the movie. You know, he kind of brings in this Chekhov's gun type thing where he mentions the...
Did you know it's not a Star Trek? I thought that was funny.
The friction, you know, you need friction to make fire, and they kind of bring that in throughout the rest of the movie, you know what I mean? Like, he brings this idea up that you need friction to make fire, and then they show that with Channing Tatum meeting the jock guy, and they're like identical, but after a while he kind of
that's pretty cool. I didn't pick up on that at all.
there's a lot
I kind of thought that he was going to be the bad guy, because I'm like, well, here's a surprise somewhat bigger name showing up in the film, so he's obviously going to be the bad guy, but didn't happen. Not to throw out spoilers, I guess.
There's back to what I was saying. There's I don't know, like, I just want to talk about some of the things I kind of didn't care for in the movie. And one was, honestly, Ice Cube's character. Like,
oh, no.
For some reason, it got so annoying after a while. I was like, oh, my gosh. Number one, it's a very generic cop boss character. Number 2, it's Ice Cube. Like, I don't think Ice Cube ever acts outside of his own self. Like, every character he's in, he's Ice Cube. He's not the commissioner. He's not this guy.
Yeah.
And I just got annoyed. But granted, I was annoyed by his like dialogue and half of the stuff he was saying.
Yep.
I did enjoy one of my favorite scenes is the whole boss's daughter segment.
Yeah, let's not get into that quite
I won't get into it. I just wanted to reference that just for now.
Because that's a huge spoiler for the movie.
That's what I want to talk about.
But I'll come back to that too. I thought he was underused and a little poorly used in 21 Jump Street in the first film. And I think they found a couple of ingenious gags for this movie for him to be in that I just completely lost it on, that were so funny. But we'll get to those in spoilers. Before we get there, I wanted to mention real fast, maybe one of the problems I had with the film that I kind of talked about earlier was the story, I guess. The narrative of the film itself, like I said earlier, this movie is a lot like the Lego Movie, and it doesn't have a solid narrative, but it constantly throws every type of joke possible at the screen, so it's doing that too. So it's kind of a style of these guys. But I thought 21 Jump Street had a stronger central story to it and character arc between the two characters. That's what I really liked about it. It felt more like a Jonah Hill vibe, and I think he had a big part in writing the first one, so that's probably why it felt that way. Where this one felt more like, you know what, guys, we don't really have a good story idea here, but who cares? We got a whole bunch of really good jokes. Let's just do the most generic storyline possible, a retread of the first one. We'll make fun of it in the opening dialogue, and then we'll just go do it anyway, where I thought they should have made fun of it and then done something a little more creative, I guess.
And that was another thing I wanted to talk about with the whole referencing, because really, after watching the first movie, I'm like, this is not different from the first movie whatsoever.
No.
And I was like watching him like, that's the dumbest. And I was actually kind of like, this isn't even funny. That's why I even thought that wasn't even funny. But I was like, well, they're just saying the exact same thing what they did, and it's the exact same movies.
I liked the way, I thought it was clever how they referenced it through dialogue, and the dialogue worked both ways. That is kind of hard to do, where the dialogue works for the story that they're in, but it also references and is kind of a metaphor for the movie industry and the way that the movie was conceived and marketed too. So,
well, yeah, I think just the title, 22 Jump Street. You know, like you get that idea that they realize that they're being ridiculous.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good joke too about 22 being across the street. Oh, hey guys, it's across the street. I think maybe it might have felt a little tired when you see the movie because they did play that in every preview possible, you know. Okay, but the first time I saw it, I think I chuckled. I didn't really laugh about it in the theater. Just when they look over and said, "Hey, there, looks like next year they're building 33 Jump Street."
23 Jump Street.
23
or 23.
Don't get ahead of yourself there.
And they also also referenced it with they're like condominiums, 23 Jump Street condominiums instead of a church this time.
Yeah, that's
another thing I liked about this movie was especially in the intro part, the bad boys imagery. Did you ever catch that? When they were the first scene where they're with the squid and all that stuff, and the first like drug heist, they had a lot of like Bad Boys imagery, especially with like the explosions and stuff going on.
Yeah, right off the bat, there was a yellow tint to the whole scene, which is like a huge benchmark of Michael Bay action movies. There's always like a yellow tint to it or something, or a yellow car, or wasn't there a yellow Lamborghini in this movie too?
Yes.
So I think they were playing that up. I know the one really funny scene I don't know if anybody else got, but at the end of the movie, Chanum Tatum's running down a Mexican alleyway or something, and there's a bunch of doves, and he just kicks them out of the way and goes, "Stupid doves," which is a play off of the first movie, which is a play off of John Woo in his Hong Kong movies. Used to always have like slow motion doves flying up in his action sequences, and they played that in the first one. I liked how they just like brushed it aside in the second one, just like, this is dumb, and made a joke out of it, and it really made me laugh when he did it.
I don't know, I just really liked their direction and how they showed a lot of imagery and just, you know what I'm talking about, like style in there.
Yeah, they did. That kind of goes back into that whole like kitchen sink comedy thing, because like the movie is kind of that way too. That's kind of why I felt a little fragmented in the flow of the film itself, just because they use all kind of like, there's a whole scene where they first get to college, and it's just a montage scene of them saying like different items, like beanbag, and then they do a joke with a beanbag, and like, this thing, bacon sizzler. Which just, it's like the whole movie stops for a second, which the sequence itself's funny, but in the overall structure of the film, I thought was a little strange. And they do that a lot, and I think that's kind of my overarching point. So I'm glad you brought that up to how their filmmaking style goes, where I don't feel like their storytelling and the story of the film is that good. I think it's mostly the story's not good, but the plot is usually very good.
I guess, yeah, it just kind of takes you out of the story for a second to see a funny joke, which... Yeah, I mean, if that's what they're going for, just to make you laugh, then it works.
Sure.
Yeah, I get you.
It's not like a Wes Anderson film where it seems like everything is just on the same style and the same tone the entire way of the movie. These guys, they don't care. They'll just throw anything in there that they think will get a laugh. And I mean, I don't have a problem with that. Overall, I just think it could have been a better film if they tried to work some of that stuff in. And maybe that was a bad example, because I don't know if that necessarily doesn't fit in. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I agree with you, Nick. I think, that scene specifically, I do remember thinking it was kind of strange, but I mean, it was still funny, and it works. And I think it's just kind of their style, that they kind of like to do all kinds of different different stuff in one movie, if that makes sense. Jacob?
All right, well, let me go into a couple other things I had here, some of the problems I had with the film. Maybe I think we've kind of highlighted a few of them, and I'll go over a couple other ones that I had. I think I just said the story. I felt the story was weak, but the plot is strong. So the difference, the way I was explained, story is what happens, plot is how it happens. So the overall story that holds the movie together was a little weak, but the moment to moment, like what is happening on screen, was always, I thought, pretty clever. So it's just tying that stuff together and making it flow smoothly was my biggest problem with the film. There was some subplots in the movie. Did anybody notice? Like we talked a little bit about the football player relationship. Like as soon as that served its purpose for Chanum Tatum's character, like he was dropped. We never saw him. We saw him, but he was never dealt with again. The same thing happens for the love interest in this film. Once,
she just kind of goes out of nowhere.
Yeah,
once that's done, we don't see her till like the last 5 minutes of the movie.
Not the once it's done. Once Hill's storyline, like his need in the story, his character arc need for her to be there in the story, ends for her need. She goes away and like he goes on his journey. Yeah. And I guess the film's about him, so that I don't know, you can argue against it or for it, but I think it felt to me like they should have tied that up in some way, being that it took a lot of film time.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did anybody else feel that way about the love interest and the other jock? I felt like they were just used and then dropped, and we never saw them again. I thought they were going somewhere.
Classic college romance being used and just dropped.
Was being used and dropped. I'm kind of confused because I rewatched the first one, and doesn't Jonah Hill, like he with the girl in the first one?
Yeah, he totally has a thing with her.
I was kind of hoping they would address that or at least make a joke of it in this one, unless I missed something.
No, they didn't even reference that.
He just went off.
I thought
again,
maybe the fact that she was in high school.
Yeah, well, I thought they could have made some jokes about that in the beginning. I thought that would have been pretty funny, but I don't know.
I felt that too, and I think that falls into my overarching feelings.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe that's kind of your...
that there's not a lot of continuity between story threads going on here. And to me, at the end of the movie, Chanum Tatum has a fight scene with two guys, like two twins. And I really thought that was going to be the redemption of that character, the football player, because I'm like, oh, remember, they're like minds are synced. They're going to come in and they're going to fight these two twins, and it just didn't happen. I was like, that was a perfect point to wrap that character up, and it doesn't happen. But
instead, he has some really weird.
Yeah, he has a really bad, and that was probably my biggest.
Some girl.
Yeah. That was Hill.
Really...
That wasn't Chanum.
No. He like picks up the girl and starts like
using her as like a bow staff.
That part.
I thought that was really stupid.
Yeah, that was kind of silly and not really funny, but which kind of contradicting. But and the other thing I wanted to mention before we go into spoilers was the action. Like, did anybody like the action in this movie?
You mean all the running and just random like climbing?
Yeah, anything that had to do with action.
There's nothing really actiony in it. I didn't see.
I think there was a lot of action. There was a car chase sequence, which was probably the best of the action.
But I mean, there
was some gunfights in the open. That was a truck chase.
That was the only memorable thing though from that movie to me was just that car chase in the campus. Because everything else to me, it kind of just went by.
Yeah, I agree.
There wasn't a lot of memorable. I didn't see a lot of memorable action. Like the only thing I can remember was them running and Channing Tatum like climbing or doing the Spider-Man thing down those steps.
Yeah.
And other than that, and then the car chase. And other than that, that's the most.
Which were used for good comic effect. I just didn't think they were good action films. And later on in the show, we'll do our top 3 favorite action comedies, and all 3 of my favorite action comedies. You could take the comedy out and they're still really good action movies. So I think that's where it let me down a little bit, was like, I know it's goofy and it's silly and it's over the top, but I think they could have still done something better with the action. I don't know. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the action, I think there was probably more action with the first one. I felt, with all the gun sequence, like the gun fights and stuff, which I thought were done really well in the first one, but were also funny. And they kind of found a way to work them in and make them funny, but also make them cool action scenes.
Yeah,
and I feel like there kind of wasn't as much of that in the second one. I don't think.
Agreed.
Yeah, it just wasn't memorable. Like with Captain America 2, you could dissect it and you could say, "Oh, do you remember this fight scene, or do you remember that?"
Yeah,
like it's memorable stuff. But
right.
like you can't sit and look at 22 Jump Street and be like, "Oh, do you remember when?"
That didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I think on the other hand of that, where they do make up for that is that I can do that about the action sequences and the comedy sequences. Yeah. So let's jump into that one now and get into the spoiler zone.
So we're in the spoiler zone?
Let's move into spoiler zone.
Spoiler zone.
All right, take us into that, John.
All right. Can I start with...
Go, John.
I want to start with the boss's daughter thing, since I hinted at that. Okay. I love the payoff of that, because number one, when they started off with, he shacked up with the lady, and the boss was like, all right, man, all right, and you come to find out it's the boss's daughter, I lost it. And the scene where with the Ice Cube was in the restaurant, whatever, for like family visit day, and he just starts freaking out. I was like, give me some green beans, and he gave him like 3 of them. He's like, give me some more green, and like grabs like handfuls, starts tearing the place up. And then the part where when they finally come back and Channing Tatum finds out, he just loses it, because like, you gave him a high five for macking on your daughter. You just and I was
those are 2 of the 3 scenes I thought in this movie that really are some of the funniest, cleverest gags I've seen in a long time.
And I didn't even catch the part where he gave like the fact that he was like, all right, man, like gave him like the high five and the handshake stuff because he macked on that chick, and the fact that it was his daughter. I didn't even realize that till like Channing Tatum did that, and I was losing it the entire time.
Yeah, let's jump back the first part of that scene where we've met the daughter. We don't know it's the daughter yet. I thought it was just brilliantly planned out and executed, and that it's a surprise. It's a twist in the movie when
a great twist.
He shows up at Parents' Day and turns around and there's Ice Cube, and they both have this whole like weird. It just plays out in like weird noises and awkward reactions.
It is.
To each other for
like,
a while.
What are you doing here, Doug?
Yeah, and it's just like once they figure it out, it's just neither actor has to say anything, and they play it to such great comic effect, and just the reactions and just the total dread on both sides, different kinds of dreads on both sides.
I think that was the first time for a while in a movie since Dinner with Schmucks where I felt like uncomfortable in the theater just watching them. Like, oh my gosh, like, dude, that's the boss's daughter. Like, oh my gosh. And I was like freaking out. I was laughing, but I was like, oh my, like I felt so uncomfortable.
Yeah, I just think that whole scene it just plays out to delightful comic tension while Jonah and Ice Cube, react to one another with anger, uncomfortable awkwardness, and just weird speechless horror. And the whole scene builds to a like riotous culmination as Ice Cube takes out his pent up rage, like John said, on a buffet table. And by the end of that scene, all he does is he turns around, he curses at a plant and kicks it into the water.
Yes.
And I absolutely lost it in theaters for about 2 minutes after that scene. I mean, that's where people were probably looking back like, is this guy seriously still laughing? So I thought that was a great scene. Jake, what do you think? Like, do you think these are...
Well, yeah, I think Ice Cube definitely sold it on this one. If I can understand, John, why you didn't really like him as he's playing himself, but I really thought in this one he brought it. He was more of a character in this one, and he had more like funny parts in this movie, so I just really liked that.
Yeah, he was used better. I feel like the first movie they're like, hey, look, we've got Ice Cube. He shows up, drops a couple F-bombs, and that's all he did in the entire movie.
And that's kind of like, back to like watching the first one, thinking about that now and thinking about this one, I think he was better utilized in the second one more than, because you're right, the first one, his character really was just thrown in there.
Yeah, it was a big disappointment for me because, like, obviously we've seen in this movie how funny he can be.
Yeah, they also use him to kind of turn a cliche on its head, at the end when it's like, oh, you're going to take a girl as the hostage? And it's like, no, I'm going to take you. And then she shoots him in the foot and takes him away. And he's sitting in the car, and all of a sudden you see Schmidt driving in the Lambo. And he's like...
No, go ahead.
Yeah, he's about to catch him, but then he realizes it's Schmidt driving the car instead of Janko. And
yeah,
I thought that was just awesome.
But let's jump to the second part of that scene where I think it's great how they not only made one of the funniest scenes in the movie, but they come back around using that same gag of the Ice Cube having the daughter dating Jonah Hill, and they mine it for even more, which I think is the second funny scene in this movie that's like just one of the all-time, is probably going to be an all-time memorable scene of just how hilarious it is when the setup comes back around in the scene where Tatum, Ice Cube, and Hill meet up at the police station and confront the situation for the first time, there's a scene where, you know, Tatum is sitting there and he and he's trying to figure out the problem. Like the movie just stops because I missed like the delivery line on it, and then I'm like, why are we just sitting here watching Channing Tatum stare at the screen? And it was just a pause because his character's, you know, is a little dumber in the movie to catch up with what actually happens, and then the payoff for that is just absolute hilarity as he runs around the room high-fiving at everybody at how funny it is that that Hill, you know, had relations with Ice Cube's daughter. But what I mean, did anybody else find these? Like, I think these scenes are absolutely hilarious. Like something I haven't seen since probably the last or the first Hangover movie.
Yeah,
you know, just really good set pieces like this, scenes, action or comedy scenes that play out so well and so funny.
Well, that and there's another key scene, which one of the scenes I actually had my first like laugh out loud moment was when they're coming in for like the poetry night when you first meet the boss's daughter.
Yep.
And how the guy's like, what are something, you know, what is like something that's tasty? And he like says what he does. Yeah. And he's like, he's completely bombing, yelling out random words, like just dirty random words or like object, whatever.
Yeah.
And like how the guy's like completely failing. He's like, no, what's something you like to feed? And Channing Tatum says his other thing. And it just
has nothing to do with the scene.
I thought it was the funniest thing ever. And
no, I lost.
And then when he did the whole finally did the rap and he said like drugs or whatever, like she died, and he goes like that was for the chick that died in the movie.
Yep.
It was like that was for her. Drops the mic, walks off.
Yeah.
I lost it. I was
pretty
like, this
hilarious. But and the third scene for me that I really had never seen before, and this one wasn't quite as laugh out loud funny as the other two, but it's something I've never seen played out this way before, is the showdown, the fight scene between the main bad girl, guy, and Jonah Hill in a crowded hotel.
Are you
as
trying
they
to kiss
fight
me?
And can't decide if they're kissing or, you know, having relations or what, and both of them being revolted, but yet turned on, I guess, by the the physicality of the fight scene at the same time. And it was just this whole weird sequence where I just couldn't stop like giggling the entire time, as every time they'd go to punch each other, the girl would lean in for a kiss.
He's
and
like, what are you doing?
Jonah would like revolt from that. And then, you know, I just never seen anything. I had never seen that. You know, I've seen a lot of plays on the fight scene before. I'd never seen that kind of, I guess, deconstruction of a guy-on-guy fight scene before. You know what I mean? Because that's basically what they're doing is deconstructing. Like, here's a physical interaction where you guys are going to just pound together, you know, to use a crude metaphor for that whole scene. And they play it. I mean, that's what they do. Anybody else get that vibe, or is that just
I thought,
reading too deeply into it?
No, I thought it was fantastic. I was laughing the entire time when he's like finally like, what are you doing? He's like, aren't you gonna kiss me? And he's like, no, I'm fighting you. And then he's like, well, stop kissing me, weirdo. and then she always throws in her like old person puns or whatever. It's like, yeah, I remember that back in I bet you remember that back in World War II, you know. And right when they're fighting, and oh my gosh, I thought it was great. Jordan, what did you guys feel about that?
Yeah, I know. I thought that was hilarious. That chick, I don't know what the actress's name, but she was just a riot throughout the whole movie. Well, not the whole movie because she's not in the whole thing, but like,
yeah, every time she's on screen, she actually had some good jokes.
I also like this too. They had a lot of different possibilities for who the bad guy is. It was almost like a mystery, you know. You had to find out, where they introduce Rooster, the football guy, and they introduce a bunch of characters like Patton Oswalt, like you said, or the psychologist, just people that you could think are the villain, but then it ends up being the pink chick that's making fun of Jonah Hill for sleeping with her roommate
and being old and like calling him out like, oh, those crow's feet on your face.
Yeah. I thought it was cliched. It was cliched, but it was also like funny, you know.
It kind of is cliche, but it paid off in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
like, there was some payoff towards in that. Those kind of lame jokes is really what they were.
I think just because she was a great actress overall, you know, I think that's just why.
Well, and
if
anybody's seen Workaholics at all, my guess is.
Oh yeah,
she's the girl on Workaholics, and she plays like the exact same character in Workaholics, where she's like this really awkward. I guess she isn't so much of a mean person. She's more of the awkward, like, hey guys, I want to help out, but I can't do anything or whatever.
Right. I really, really enjoyed this yin and yang theme that they had going on throughout the entire movie. Like, literally, you see Channing Tatum like in the tripping scene. They literally have like a yin and yang, and they really have this contrast where it's like Channing Tatum's in the white world and he's having fun on his trip, but then you see Jonah Hill in his little dark.
So much so scary than mine.
Yeah. And then, but I mean, it's just.
They're playing Creed
throughout the whole movie.
Creed is playing higher, but Creed is playing on his dark side.
On his dark side.
And then they have like actual twins named Yin and Yang, except for the fact that they're exactly the same.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of ironic. They have like no friction, but their relationship still works, and that kind of ties back into what I said about Patton Oswalt earlier. Is he introduces this idea that they really milk throughout the whole movie that you need this friction to have a good relationship. You need to have differences, and the opposites really go well together.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was touching on earlier, where there are just like really brilliant scripting moments, I think, in this movie. Like really, there's deeper stuff going on in it, but at the same time, you know, there's some big glaring oversights, you know, just story issues where stuff doesn't, you know, mesh together well. But I don't know, I guess in the end, you know, does it really matter? Because if they had a funny joke and they just jammed it into the story, I mean, if it got a laugh out of you, to me, that's a win in a comedy.
Right.
But
yeah,
I think they brought a lot of new stuff to this movie. I'd be ready to go see a third one if they make it right now, and I'm definitely going to go see anything else these two directors do. So anyway, I think that kind of wraps up our in-depth review of 22 Jump Street. It sounds like everybody's kind of saying go down to your local cinema and check the movie out.
Cinema.
Yeah, check it out.
Check it out.
forgot to time that, so I don't know how long it went, but I think we definitely went over half an hour since we're already in
My sweet summer's gone.
Yeah.
Now my sweet summer's gone.
I think we went longer on our.
And we are back right here on the Quantum Quadcast.
I think we got to cut this
Quadcast.
thing, come back and just
Nick, how about you just take us away on our final segment tonight?
All right, we're going to end it today with our top 3 favorite films. This week's genre is going to be action comedies in honor of 22 Jump Street, which was also an action comedy. So we put together a list of our favorite 3 action comedies, and we're going to go right around the room. Let's get it started with Jordan.
All right, one of mine, Nick, I gotta say, is Men in Black.
First one.
The first Men in Black.
Yes,
Right.
first Men in Black. Loved it, of course, Will Smith. I'm a big Will Smith guy. And I also love Tommy Lee Jones, though. I think the way their comedy style works with Will Smith, kind of over the top, in your face. And Tommy Lee Jones, kind of, the deadpan. I think one of my favorite sequences is when they go and they have a thing with Jeeves, the weapons dealer, and who's kind of illegally selling weapons. And Tommy Lee Jones just keeps repeatedly blowing his head off, or he blows his head off, and then Will Smith is freaking out, and he's like, because he's never seen that kind of thing, and it's just a whole hilarious scene with Tommy Lee Jones just completely stone-faced,
I know it has to be
head
on
off
this
over and
review.
over again. And
Yeah, that was a
I
good,
love
very
it.
good
I
gag.
just thought that was an example of, and there's lots of stuff like that throughout the movie.
I'm sorry.
But I just really
Okay,
loved
good,
it.
because I thought it was
That
going to
done
be.
really well. And also,
I thought it was going to be a wash. We're all
scenes
just going
in
to sit here
it.
and say, yeah, this is garbage.
So,
Yeah, I would agree. That's a good one. Let's jump over to Jake. What's your
My
number
number
3?
three is Super. It is a movie with Rainn Wilson and really second star-studded. It's got Kevin Bacon, Liv Tyler. Yeah, it's got some big cast for how low budget of a movie it was. But basically, Rainn Wilson plays this burger cook, or he's a cook at a restaurant.
We're going to keep this under
He's
10.
married
so
to a
watch
drug
out for my
addict
finger
played by
twirl.
Liv Tyler, who kind of falls in
So
love
everybody
with
gets about
this
2.5
drug
minutes.
lord and kind of goes
So,
to his
like,
house.
say you're moving one scene, go.
Rainn Wilson decides to
Yeah, I'm
dress
gonna
up like
jump right in and
a
out of it, so try
superhero,
to, like,
vigilante, and
Don't rabble
kind
on.
of
I'm
goes
trying to
and
get out. Just
saves the day, I guess. But
We're starting with
I won't
3,
spoil
right?
the end.
Or just if you want, throw it to the next
It's
person.
it's
I'm
more
just
of a
gonna keep
dark
going
kind
around
of
the
comedy.
room.
There's like
Probably
gore
start with
and
Jordan, or unless
shooting
you're
and
gonna throw it
stuff
to
like
me.
that. So it's kind of
I'll
it's
throw it
more
to
of
you.
like
No.
It's kind of an independent. Are you gonna
Yeah,
introduce this
kind of
section?
independent
feel
hidden
to it, too?
hidden
You want
comedy
to
to
do
it.
It's up to
So,
you.
and I just love Ellen Page. Her character in this it's different from what I've ever seen.
Actually, you introduce it because I introduced the last
Great.
one.
All right, John. Let's jump over to you. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is Kelly's Heroes. It's like an old film with Clint Eastwood and Donald Sutherland and a couple other people I can't remember.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much they go out and they are trying to find Hitler's lost treasure or something like that. And I enjoyed the film because number 1, it was just hilarious, and number 2, like, I know this is, but the genre that it portrayed, and also it portrayed a video game that I played, which is Battlefield Bad Company, the very first one, where it was humorous as well as it was a shooter, so it was action, and the whole point of that game was you're finding the bad guy's treasure. And I just like the fact that it's a World War II movie, but it's taking something. Usually World War II is a very kind of dark just content because of what happened, and the fact that they're making light of something,
adding a little bit of more humor into
adding
it.
a little bit more humor. I
Just
enjoyed it. And then
contrast.
Clint Eastwood, I enjoy Clint Eastwood and his films, and that was probably one of my favorite ones. He's probably in.
All right,
Nick, what about you?
My number 3 was Die Hard with a Vengeance. This is the Die Hard 3. So the third Die Hard marked John McTiernan's return to the series after sitting out for the lackluster Part 2. So Die Hard.
It's like you wrote that down.
I just have to get that dig in on Die Hard 2 anytime I can. It's not one of my favorite films ever. But, Die Hard is a series about a cop played by Bruce Willis who always finds himself in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I think this is, as sequels go, one of the best sequels to keep things fresh. The third movie threw out the John McClane stuck in a building plot, which was pretty much the first one. He's stuck in a building. The second one he's stuck in an airport. And it it just abandoned that trope altogether and expanded the action in New York to New York City.
Bigger budget.
They also added the humorous relationship to the movie by casting Samuel L. Jackson as Zeus, an unsuspecting bystander who saves Willis's McLean and is then wrapped up in a terrorist plot. So to me, that the adding of more humor, there's always a little bit of humor in the Die Hard films, but the third one, I think it really came to the forefront of the film itself and kind of replaced McLean's wife, which was a big part of the first movie, and then just a terrible part of the second movie, as they tried to shoehorn her back into the movie. So in the third one, they get rid of that altogether. They bring in Samuel L. Jackson. I think the two of them just have excellent chemistry together, which really helps this film make up for not having the family element for Willis's character of McLean. So that's my third. Jordan, let's jump back to you for your number two.
Number two, I'm gonna go with Tropic Thunder, and I don't know how familiar you are with that, but you know, Robert Downey Jr., Ben Stiller, Jack Black. Basically, they're all these actors who are kind of dysfunctional and put in a kind of a Vietnam War movie, but the director gets kind of fed up because they're losing tons of money and they all have their egos, and they get put into like a real jungle and wrapped up in a real plot with actual bad guys. And it's just funny because they've got to kind of overcome that. It's funny too. I guess
decides to dress up
scenes
like
in particular,
superhero,
and there's so many to choose from. It's hard.
Kind of goes and saves the day.
Well, you can even start with the opening sequence.
Spoil the
I love just the intro.
It's more of a dark kind of comedy.
Yeah, with the huge explosion.
Oh yeah,
he has
the
no
the
arms.
intros, where they have kind of like the platoon thing, where
it's kind of
they're all running around, and Ben Stiller is like this almost this Tom Cruise caricature type thing, where he's in all these action movies and he's getting shot as he's running, but it's like this minute-long sequence of him just like shaking his arms in this field and just getting shot over and over and over again, and he has this ridiculous look on his face, and then he at one point catches a grenade that it explodes and he has these like banana peel hands.
Yes.
It's just really funny because there are a lot of cool action scenes, but the way they do it is just ridiculously over the top, which I love.
But the genre
that's a
that
super fun
also,
movie.
Did you know Ben Stiller actually directed that? I did not know that till today.
Yeah, he was kind of the creative force behind that one. They're putting it together that they were kind of trying to do this all-star comedy cast because actually Wilson.
I just like
it's a
World War II movie.
No, what's the Wilson brothers' name? I can't think of his name. Owen Wilson was also supposed to be in the movie, but he had this suicide attempt thing around that same time and opted out of the movie. But I think McConaughey replaced his part.
He's really funny in it. Yeah, it's just a lot of funny, and Tom Cruise has a little part in there too. It's just
he's kind of a highlight. But Jake, let's jump over to your number two.
Okay, my number two is Kung Fu Hustle.
Good one.
Yeah, I really like this because I'm not like a big action fan. I mean, I enjoy action movies, but one in particular kind of genre, a subgenre from action is like the ninja kung fu movies. I don't really buy into that. So this one is like a parody of those movies, and it's just hilarious. It's got like these really cheesy action sequences where you can tell that they're either wired up or they're just like really just cheesy, and the voice dub work is just spot on. Like it almost looks like they're actually saying the things that they're saying, but no.
I was going to say there's pure sarcasm.
That was some pretty heavy sarcasm.
I'd argue as an action guy that I think the action in that movie, although played off for cheesy effect like you're saying, is also actually highly choreographed and pretty cool in its own right. There's actually some really cool sequences.
Yeah, there's this one
in a real kind of like Looney Tunes, Wile E. Coyote kind of violent way, or kind of funny.
Right, there's this one sequence in particular where it's like all the mob people or the mafia guys are sitting in a town, and there's like 3 super awesome martial arts guys, but they're just like, for some reason, all the mafia guys have hatchets in their hands, and I just don't know why.
That came out of nowhere.
That came out of nowhere, and they're all like, I don't know, they're just the 3 mafia guys, or the 3 kung fu masters kind of
I'm gonna go with
kick the crap out of everyone there.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. John, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is actually Ghostbusters, and granted, it may not come off as very actiony. It has some really key elements, like especially with the proton packs and just really catching ghosts. But one of my favorite scenes isn't so much the I guess an actiony scene, which is kind of what we're trying to talk about, but it's a lot of the dialogue in that film was fantastic. One was the elevator scene. He's like, "What are you, some kind of cosmonaut?" He's like, "No, we're exterminators." He's like, "There must be some cockroach." He's like, "Bite your head off, man." I think that's one of the funniest scenes. And then my favorite one is when they go up there and they're first testing on everything, and they say like, these things haven't been tested, and they could like melt your face off or whatever. And they go up there, and this lady is just pushing her cart. One of the custodians pushing her cart, and they just go like, "No, throw it!" And they just like blow the whole thing up. And then she's like, I can't remember what she says. Like, "What the heck's your deal?" It's like, "Sorry, we didn't." And they just nonchalantly walk it off, and then they're like, "Okay, first test was good." But yeah, I would say Ghostbusters is probably my number 2. What's your number 2 there, bud?
Mine's gonna be Lethal Weapon 2, going along with the sequel run here. No, I think there's a lot more comedy in the sequel than there was in the first one. It's a sequel to 1987's Lethal Weapon, which saw Mel Gibson as a burnout cop who is contemplating suicide after the death of his wife, which may sound a little cliche, but this is kind of the movie that started that whole kick, I think, of 80s action movies having the burnt-out cop, that's on the edge and crazy. Like Riggs was the first one there, But part 2 focuses more on the film's mismatched partnership between Gibson's Riggs and Danny Glover's Murtaugh. The film brings more of the comedy to the forefront with gags like Murtaugh's toilet being rigged to explode if he stands up. So there's a really great classic sequence where Murtaugh and Riggs have this heartfelt scene between the two of them, solidifying their like bromance over a toilet that's about to explode, and they have to jump off. But great scene.
Okay, my number 2.
The film also added Joe Pesci
Hustle.
to the cast, and he becomes like kind of their humorous
really like
sidekick. And there's a very memorable bit in the film with Joe Pesci concerning why never to go to a drive-through. I can't really talk about it here because there's a lot of expletives in it. But very, very funny part and a great addition to the series, and a lot more humor in this one with that addition.
So this one is like a parody.
The one thing I really like about the film on the action side is the film also finds a clever way to retain Riggs as cop on the edge, because after the first film has him dealing with his on the edge, his suicidal tendencies, but the second film finds a great way that's actually a huge twist and a pretty brave move by filmmakers, a way to bring him back to the edge again in the film, in the third act of it. It's fantastic. So one of my favorite movies of all time, and definitely a great action comedy for my number 2. And let's move on to number 1. Number 1. Jordan,
number 1 for 20 minutes.
Yes. Jordan, give me your number 1.
Okay, my number 1, I gotta say, is The Mummy, 1999, the Mummy remake.
Yeah,
only good one.
The only good one. Yes, I say what you will about Brendan Fraser, but I think his early work was wonderful. I feel like he was really the kind of poor man's Harrison Ford in the original Mummy. He's actiony.
Showing your age, because early work for me from Fraser is like Casino Man.
That came out of nowhere, and they're all
like 10 years before he became an action star. So
okay. Well, I mean, early for me.
I'm an old man.
I'm not elderly.
Crap out of everyone there. So.
Yeah, but for us youngins, Brendan Fraser's early work in the Mummy, he could be funny. He could be an action guy. I guess one scene particularly where they're trying to get to the Imhotep's the temple and all that stuff. And there's this recurring character Benny, who's kind of this sleazy rat type guy. And there's this whole funny scene where Brendan Fraser's kind of interrogating him and just kind of throwing him around, and at one point he just like sees him and just throws him off the boat for
it wasn't really. I think that kind of humor too is what set that movie apart for me at the time. There was a lot of humor like that just seemed new and kind of different.
just kind of funny jokes that just kind of come in. I mean, much kind of like the classic Indiana Jones, where
and it's like, oh, throw it! And there's like
shoots the sword.
It's just kind of unexpected and funny, and I thought there were a lot of moments like that in the original Mummy.
They just nonchalantly walk it off, and then they're like, okay.
Let's jump over to Jacob. Your number 1.
My number 1.
Number 1. Gage.
Fuzz.
What's your
Fuzz. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yes, it's
Dang it. I'm almost mad that I didn't get that one. Go ahead.
yeah. I really like the stylized directing that Korea. It kind of makes me upset watching this movie that we didn't get this for this guy for Ant-Man.
I know,
but like all the suit up scenes and just like the really, it's just really different editing, different visuals for somebody to bring to an action comedy. And it kind of almost feels like a slasher movie. Like there's like almost a really like a
there is
Freddy
kind of a
versus
horror
Jason
element
feel to it, where it's like there's this guy going around murdering people. Well,
it's also pretty.
I won't say
violent.
TI necessarily, but anyways, and it just you get that feeling from it where it's like, well, geez, who's this murderer? Is it like something scary? But then you also get like all the comedic like value from Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, who are all just also like one of my favorite reasons, or one of the best reasons that I like this movie. Is they're just amazing together. I haven't really seen the other. What's the other two that kind of go along? Yeah, Shaun of the Dead. There's that one. I've seen that one, but what's the newest one? At World's End.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So
if you like one, watch them all because they're all pretty good.
Yeah, I really love Hot Fuzz. So.
All right, John, let's jump over to your number.
My number one is The Incredibles. Probably one of Pixar's best films, and sadly it does not have a sequel, but maybe for a good reason. And this film is just about a superhero family that is kind of in, I guess you would say hiatus, my guess, or superheroes have become like looked down upon because they really are destroying the world and not helping anybody. And then they finally go back and now they're superheroes again. There's a lot of things in this film that were just hilarious, and it's hard to pick from. I know it's hard. But, I know one of the montages was when they're discussing the costume, where he's like, "Oh man, I really want a cape," and she's like, "No, capes are stupid." And then like the show, like all these like montages of people getting like killed because their capes are getting like sucked into like a tornado, an airplane, or anything like that. Clever sequence. And then also, I think one of my favorite ones is the final fight scene where they're fighting like the giant ball of death, pretty much. And the Samuel L. Jackson's character was like talking about just yelling like, "I got this guy," and he gets like flung off like into nothing. He's like, "Never mind." And I thought it was like classic. I mean, it cracked me up. I mean, that movie was just good, and then just the voice acting and everything in that film was just fantastic. Nick, what is your number one?
Number one. Anybody want to guess? Wager a guess who stars in my number one this week?
Bruce Willis.
Yep.
Arnie.
Yep.
Is it
number one for me is 1994's True Lies.
Oh, I should have called that.
This is kind of the last of the high concept, big budget 80s action movies, as well as the last great Arnold vehicle, I think, too. Which I don't know. Jordan will feel me on this one. Everybody else will laugh.
Not Batman and Robin.
No, not Batman and Robin.
That was the biggest Arnold vehicle that ever come around.
The movie features a hilarious buddy relationship between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Tom Arnold, which who would have thought they'd pair those two up and it'd be hilarious.
And it actually worked.
It works well, as well as a memorable and funny performance from Bill Paxton. So, as we talked,
the cowbell of the acting community.
The cowbell of the acting community. This is a fantastic. If you haven't seen this movie, watch it just for Bill Paxton in this movie. It's endlessly quotable. One of his many endlessly quotable movies. So, the film is about a super spy who finds out his wife may be cheating on him, and then uses his CIA resources to stalk her and her possible suitor, played by Paxton. In the end, Arnold and his wife, Jamie Lee Curtis, who's also pretty good in this role, end up in the middle of a terrorist plot to nuke the U.S. The movie features really sharp, smart comedy, a strong lead performance by Arnold, and some fantastically choreographed action sequences. One of the best, I think, or one of the most memorable is there's a sequence where Jamie Lee Curtis is stuck in a car going across the bridges in the Florida Keys, those really long bridges going across the ocean down there, and there's a scene involving trucks bad guys,
And it just,
nukes
you
inside
get
the
that
trucks,
feeling from it
and
where it's like,
Harrier jets.
Awesome action.
Harrier
This
jets
murder
blowing
isn't,
up
like,
the bridge that are
scary,
really well
but then
filmed,
you
really
also
well put
get, like, all
together,
the
and
comedic, like,
really great
value
stunts
from,
all around. This is
Simon
like all my
Pegg
top
and
3. I think
Nick
these are 3
Frost,
movies
who
I
are
believe you could
also,
pull the
like, one
humor
my
out of,
favorite reasons,
and they would
or
still
one of
be
the
just
best
killer
reasons
action
that I like
movies.
this
Plus,
movie
you know, you just add that humor
is
into me
they're
that
just
pushes it over the
amazing
top.
together.
Because
I haven't
action
really seen any
action
other-
comedy is pretty much
what's the
my
other
favorite
two that kind
genre.
of go
So
along? Yeah,
that
Chanum
wraps
did
up our
that
top
when I
3,
see
and that
them,
also
but
wraps up the show.
that's the
John, you want
newest
to take us
one,
out?
At
We'd like to thank you
Yeah.
for all listening, and if you'd like to
so they-
catch the
One
Quantum
watching
Quadcast, we'll be on SoundCloud on
I
80.7
yeah, I really love
KAGC's
Hot Fuzz,
SoundCloud account. You just type in
Let's
Quantum
jump over to
Quadcast,
you.
we should be
My
there.
number
And
one
also
is
on
Incredibles.
Nick, what's it?
You can also find the video cast version of this on YouTube, either under Nick Guy Harris, all one page, that's my YouTube page, or just type in Quantum Quadcast. Should bring up all the episodes, so check one of those 2 places.
And for the Quantum Quadcast, I am John Provenzano.
I'm Nick Harris.
I'm Jordan Vash.
And I'm Jacob Cummings.
We thank you for listening. Peace
Kablooey.
out.
There's a lot of things in this film that are just hilarious. It's hard to pick from one. I know it's hard, but I know one of the montages was when they were discussing the costumes, where he's like, "Oh man, I really want a cape," and she's like, "No, capes are stupid." And then like the show, like all these like montages of people getting like killed because their capes are getting like sucked into like a tornado, an airplane, or anything like that. Clever sequence. And then also, I think one of my favorite ones is the final fight scene where they're fighting like the giant ball of death, pretty much, and the Samuel L. Jackson's character was like talking about just yelling like, "I got this guy," and he gets like flung off like into nothing. He's like, "Never mind." And he flies. I thought it was a classic. I mean, it cracked me up. I mean, that movie was just good, and then just the voice acting and everything in that film was just fantastic. Nick, what is your number 1?
Number 1.
Engage.
Anybody want to guess? Wager a guess who stars in my number 1 this week?
Bruce Willis?
Yep.
Arnie?
Yep.
Is it
Number
what
1
it
for
is?
me is 1994's True Lies.
Oh, I should have called that.
This is kind of the last of the high concept, big budget 80s action movies, as well as the last great Arnold vehicle, I think, too. Which, I don't know, Jordan will feel me on this one, everybody else will laugh.
Not Batman and Robin?
No, not Batman and Robin.
That was the biggest Arnold vehicle ever coming out.
The movie features a hilarious buddy relationship between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Tom Arnold, which who would have thought they'd pair those 2 up and it'd be hilarious.
And it actually worked.
It works well, as well as a memorable and funny performance from Bill Paxton. So,
Yes.
as we talked,
The cowbell of the acting
yes, the
community.
cowbell of the acting community. This is a fantastic. If you haven't seen this movie, watch it just for Bill Paxton in this movie. It's endlessly quotable. One of his many endlessly quotable movies. So. The film is about a super spy who finds out his wife may be cheating on him, and then uses his CIA resources to stalk her and her possible suitor, played by Paxton. In the end, Arnold and his wife, Jamie Lee Curtis, who's also pretty good in this role, end up in the middle of a terrorist plot to nuke the U.S. The movie features really sharp, smart comedy, a strong lead performance by Arnold, and some fantastically choreographed action sequences. One of the best, I think, or one of the most memorable, is there's a sequence where Jamie Lee Curtis is stuck in a car going across the bridges in the Florida Keys. Those really long bridges going across the ocean down there, and there's a scene involving trucks, bad guys, nukes inside the trucks, and Harrier jets.
Awesome action.
Harrier jets blowing up the bridge that are really well filmed, really well put together, and really great stunts all around. This is, like all my top 3, I think these are 3 movies I believe you could pull the humor out of, and they would still be just killer action movies, plus, you just add that humor in, and to me that pushes it over the top, because action comedy is pretty much my favorite genre, so. But that wraps up our top 3, and that also wraps up the show. John, you want to take us out?
Well, we'd like to thank you for all listening, and if you'd like to catch the Quantum Quadcast, we'll be on SoundCloud on 80.7 KAGC's SoundCloud account. You just type in Quantum Quadcast, we should be there, and also on Nick, what's it?
You can also find the video cast version of this on YouTube, either under Nick Guy Harris, all one page, that's my YouTube page, or just type in Quantum Quadcast. Should bring up all the episodes, so check one of those 2 places.
And for the Quantum Quadcast, I am John Provenzano.
I'm Nick Harris.
I'm Jordan Vash.
And I'm Jacob
We
Cummings.
thank you for listening. Peace
Kablooey.
out.
I'm leaving you.
I'm leaving
Dave
you.
just say a new soap opera. You said wine and everything.
I'm leaving you.
I'm leaving.
Rosebud.
It's not your baby.
It's...
I forgot my
Oh my
three
god, that
quote.
went way long. How the hell did we go that long?
I
It seemed
was
like we
gonna-
were going quick at first.
Yeah, didn't
What
it?
time is it?
I feel
The
like
whole
we
thing seemed like we jumped right through.